Welcome to the Unlocking Profit Potential Executive Briefing Series, Mastering the Hidden Secrets of Fortune, Freedom, and Fun. And today's question is, are you operating as the Chief Executive Officer, or are you operating closer to the Chief Everything Officer? It was July 10th, 2021, when I received the call from Tim. He said, Mark, I've heard about the work you're doing with middle market companies, and I'd like to see if you could help us. I said, well, Tim, first of all, thanks for validating the importance of customer referrals. But second, give me some background on what's happening in your organization. He said, we've been in business for 17 years. We're in the commercial and industrial plumbing supply and water solutions business. And we feel like we've got a good company. We've got happy clients, but our revenue has stagnated for the last 3 years. And bottom line profitability is stuck in the low single digits. He said, we're recently so frustrated, we thought about selling the business, but the last offer that we received was an insult. So we'd like to see if you could help us get back on a profitable growth track and ultimately build a company with a higher valuation. And mastering the secrets that you're going to learn about today and throughout this series, Tim was able to take his company and grow EBITDA by 10x. So from 300,000 to 3 million, he was able to double revenue from 10 to 20 million. And you can just imagine how ecstatic Tim was when he was able to recapitalize in just 4 years at a valuation north of 25 million. That was a 20 times turn on what the most recent valuation was just 4 short years ago. And you could only imagine, my pride when him and his partners looked at me and said, Mark, we thought we could make progress, but we had no idea we could make this kind of progress in that short a period of time. And I share this story with you, not necessarily to impress you, but to impress upon you two things. Number one, the importance as the leader of your company, focusing on valuation is the ultimate measure of success. But number two, the importance of trusting these hidden secrets that I'm going to share with you starting today and over the following months as we make our way through this series. See, here is the bottom line. Every committed business owner and entrepreneur can grow faster, can grow more profitably, can experience more freedom, and have more fun doing it if they will master the hidden secrets that unlock profit potential. And today, in the next 45 minutes, you're going to walk away with one of those secrets that you can take back and immediately apply in your business to start experiencing more fortune, freedom, and fun. And I bet you could use just a little bit more fortune, freedom, and fun. But here's what I see with entrepreneurs. If you're like a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet, you started your journey because one, you wanted to make good money, if not great money. Number two, you wanted the freedom that could come from owning your own business. And three, you wanted the fun or the energy that comes from doing work that you're truly passionate about. Yet here's what I find when I talk to entrepreneurs, just like you, maybe years or sometimes decades later, they're working harder than they thought they'd have to work. They're making less money than they feel like they're worth. Instead of freedom, they're feeling like the business controls them. And instead of joy, they may be losing confidence. They may even be stagnating, or worse yet, completely stuck. In fact, I just onboarded a new client. His name's Tom. Tom runs a $130 million top line business, 17% EBITDA. And when I did my first call with Tom, he said, Mark, when I come into the office, this place just sucks the life out of me. And you may find that strange or odd. You may even think, God, I'd love to have a business generating that kind of revenue and that kind of profitability. But what I have found in my 15 years of working with entrepreneurs across all different industries, from companies the size of Tim's to companies the size of Tom's, as well as those that are much larger in the middle market, is I find that there are these hidden drainers of profitability, of freedom, and positive energy. And these drainers are oftentimes invisible to the entrepreneur, and many of them run counter to the principles that the business was founded on. And one of the first decisions that Tim made when we started working together was he was not going to succumb to this chief everything officer ceiling. And Tim had recently been promoted to CEO by the two founders of the company. And the decision was made that I'm going to work as a CEO, working on the business, not in the business. And the two founders decided to take the role of we're going to take roles within the company, ultimately reporting to Tim, but still as the majority shareholders in the company. And then Tim decided that he didn't have to do this alone and hired a coach to come help him. But his focus in this role, and our focus was as CEO, how do we do less, not more? So let's talk about what is the number one job of the CEO. And you got it. You got it right. I linked this in my opening. It's to drive valuation. Now, many of you might look at me and say, Mark, but I'm not interested in selling my business. And selling your business is only one reason to focus on valuation, but there's many others. For example, acquisitions. If you're going to truly scale your business, at some point, you're going to start doing acquisitions, and you may be doing them today. But here's what I have found in working with middle market entrepreneurs. If you believe your business is worth a 6x multiple, you're going to have a hard time buying a business that's trading at a 7, an 8, or a 9 times multiple. You're going to think, I need to get a business that's less expensive than mine is. But if you think your business is trading at a 9 or a 10 times multiple, then you're going to be eager to acquire those businesses at a 7 or 8 times multiple, because you're immediately going to get the gain when you acquire that business. And you're going to scale faster with less effort and have more fun doing it if you can buy or acquire higher quality companies. So getting clear on what your business is worth is a key first step in executing a great acquisition strategy. Second, and I'm not a proponent for taking on debt. However, if your organization was going to be purchased by a PE company, they would fund that acquisition with 50% of their capital, and then they would go leverage the other 50%. In other words, they would borrow the other 50%. They would put it in your business with the goal of paying off that debt in 5 years. A number of savvy entrepreneurs are saying to themselves, why don't I just PE myself? I can go borrow money to allow us to make the strategic moves we need to make with the goal of quickly paying it off. This becomes more easy when you have a high value company as recognized by you, and of course, as recognized as the bankers that are ultimately going to lend you money. And then third, the higher your valuation, the easier it is for you to create competitive or above market executive and team compensation plans. The more you can drive valuation, the more you can share wealth that doesn't hurt your earnings, and it becomes a competitive advantage in the war for talent in today's market. So your question is probably, so what should I think about in terms of building valuation in the organization that I lead. And the great Jim Rohn coined this phrase. Tony Robbins made it super popular, but success leaves clues. So it's always worthwhile saying who are the entrepreneurs, who are the CEOs, the leaders that are most successful at driving valuation today. And I compiled a list. At the top of the list is a guy named Tim Cook, happens to be the CEO of Apple. And you may be surprised that he's the CEO today, that's alive today, that's leading the company today, or in the history of any other CEO that's existed, that's created the most market value. And this list is about 30 days old. It shifts a little bit with market caps and what have you. But what might also surprise you with these CEOs that are at the top of the list is that three of them are non-founder CEOs. So they raised up, they came up from within the company and ultimately were promoted. Only two are the founders. So that would be 60% of my top five companies or top five CEOs that have created the most market value were non-founders, 60%. Now, what you might also find interesting, if you looked at the Fortune 500, the Fortune 500, less than 5% of the companies on the Fortune 500 are led by the original founders. Now, some of that is because they've been around multiple generations, some because those founders exited and others came in and took them over, similar to Tim and Satya and Sundar. But one fact is undeniable, and that is that the companies over the long haul that are led by the entrepreneur create the most market cap over the long haul. So I point these out as just some things for you to consider as you're looking at building the valuation of your company. And in my work, I have found about 12% of the companies I work with, the founder takes a non-CEO role and brings a CEO in to actively take it to the next level. So it's about 1 in 10. But let's go back to Tim Cook. And let's say, so how did Tim do it? What does Tim focus on? And I call this the Tim Cook triad. And I'm going to let you hear it straight from Tim.
When I became dean, one of the first conversations I had was with you. And you told me that I needed to focus on at most three things. When you think about your job as CEO, what are the two or three things that you're thinking about every day? This is what I need to focus on within the company.
I spend almost all of my time on people, strategy, and execution. And I think that most everything else falls from those. If you have the most brilliant people, wicked smart people that collaborate well together, if you set in our case, we're all about products. So our strategy is very product oriented. If that strategy is right, and if you're executing like crazy, there's some things that still arise, but if you get those three right, then the world is a great place.
So here's a summary of what Tim just told us that he focuses on and wakes up on and focuses on every day, that's built Apple and built the valuation of Apple that we talked about a few minutes ago. And they center around people, strategy, and execution. And I'd invite you to take a picture of this slide if you'd like. This is a recap of what he said in the video. And here's what I see as I'm working with middle market CEOs and leaders. A lot of time and attention goes to execution, but it's not the kind of focus that that Tim talked about in the video. It's more reacting to what's not going right. We didn't get a product out. We've got a customer that's unhappy. I've got an employee that's threatening to quit. It's these urgent and important matters that suck them in, rather than strategically thinking about what systems or what architecture do I need to create that it's going to allow us to execute in a way that gives us an outsized competitive advantage. The next area that I see them work on behind execution is people. But again, it's oftentimes in reaction to I've got an employee that's quitting, I've got drama, I've got somebody that's leaving. It's it's rare or it's less common that they're strategically looking at org charts and saying, do I have the right people in the right roles? And what if we shifted it here? And I wonder if I created this department, what impact would that make on profitability? What impact would that make on our ability to grow? What impact would that make on customer satisfaction? And the one that gets the least attention is strategy. Now, most entrepreneurs I deal with would argue with me here, and they're like, Mark, we're all over strategy. But oftentimes, the kind of strategy that they're working on is strategy of how to be better, not strategy of how to be different. And different is going to pay you more from a valuation perspective than being better is. Now, we want to be better. Don't misunderstand me, but the money in your valuation comes when you can demonstrate how you're different, how you're unique and valuable to the segment that you want to serve. And so a couple questions that I challenge you with around strategy is how much time are you spending with your executive team looking for pricing power? Like, where can we get extraordinary pricing power out of the work we're doing? Most middle market CEOs and their executive teams spend more time on the cost side of the equation than on the pricing side of the equation. And I'm not saying the cost side is not important, it is, but the pricing side is just as important. So think of it as and. We want to work on cost and pricing together, not either or, and. But I would challenge you, how much time are you spending on that? The other question I'd challenge you with is how much time are you spent looking for the constraint in your industry that you can uniquely address, whether that's from a marketing perspective or a sales perspective, where we can own a constraint from a value prop that we offer to our customers, or it could be an internal constraint that if you addressed it could give you an outsized position in terms of how you can deliver better, faster, and cheaper for your customers. But this work on strategy is where the money is, and that's what has enabled Apple to scale the way they have and Tim Cook to create the market value that they have. Now, you may be saying, Mark, that's great for Apple. We're a middle market company, but these are principles that are applicable whether you're Tim's size. I'll tell you, when in working with Tim, the 4 years and getting him to the point that we did, all of our calls were strategically looking forward around these three key priorities. Very, very, very little, if any, reacting to things going wrong, employees leaving, drama. It was all about sketching and contemplating where they could be making their next move that would help make them a more valuable company and help them grow profits and cash generation. So in advance of this, so the constraint. So what keeps middle market CEOs from doing this? And this is a simple 2x2 chart. It's called the Urgent Important Matrix. It was originally developed by President Eisenhower back in the 50s. And Stephen Covey took it and popularized it in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in the book, and through his subsequent book he wrote called First Things First, he makes the argument that as leaders, we should spend our time in quadrant 2. These are important but non-urgent priorities that we should focus on. And he said the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. What happens to us in the middle market is we get sucked in to expediting and firefighting. So managing those things that are important and urgent. So my CEO clients will say, Mark, but I'm spending a lot of time on people, but they're spending time in quadrant one. They're spending time reacting to urgent, pressing issues rather than proactively thinking, how do I build a world-class leadership team? I also see them getting sucked in down here in quadrant three. In quadrant three are interruptions and busy work. This is, in my opinion, where you're doing work that somebody else on your leadership team should be doing. And part of it is because you've done it so long, it becomes a habit. Part of it is because you feel like it's just easier for you to do it. Part of it is you don't feel like you've got the confidence, back to the people issue, in the team to get it done and get it done right. And then some of you waste some time in quadrant four, but I don't see this as much as I see quadrant one and quadrant three. So let's quickly. Quadrant two, we're on plan, we're on strategy. This is where you, as a CEO, if you want to build a world-class company with top valuation, should focus most of your time. 80% of your time should be in quadrant two across those three priorities. Um, Quadrant one, no more than 10% of your time. That should be your goal. How do I get that to less than 10% of your time? Quadrant three, no more than 10% of your time. And if you're getting distracted, this is ESPN, this is Facebook book alerts, this is, stuff in the news that grabs our attention. We just got to eliminate. Some clients just uninstall these apps that are distracting their time. So in advance of this call, I sent out this form, the CEO time and valuation audit. And it's a worksheet that you can use. And I'd like you to go through and I'd like you to think back over the last 90 days and say, where is my time going? Now, if you don't have a good feel for it, you can start tracking your time, which is a great Peter Drucker, the kind of the grandfather of the modern management movement. His rule number one is know thy time. Where is your time going? And we get sucked into things and think we're spending time in one area. And if we really sit down and calculate it and really log it, you're going to be shocked how much of your time is getting sucked down into quadrant one and quadrant three time and taking you out of quadrant two. But this worksheet says how much time in people and culture, and I'd like you to think how much of it is quadrant two time on people and culture. And what is that percentage? And I'm giving you a target here that you can use of 30%. How much of your time is on strategy and capital allocation? Again, your target should be to get to 30%. But be honest with yourself today. How much time are you spending on this today? And then execution systems, we want to get to where that's 20%. We really want the business architected well. And for you to have a good second in command that's helping you architect the systems. So you should think of this, being proactive in this area, but still 20% of your time down here in execution systems. Then expediting and firefighting. This is your quadrant one, and five down here is your quadrant three. And be honest with yourself. How much of your time is off plan? In other words, if you're on plan with people and culture, you might say, I'm going to go visit one office or I'm going to have lunch with one department every month. And if you can set that as a plan and go execute it, to me, that's quadrant two. If you get sucked into going somewhere because there's a problem, there's drama, you're losing an employee, that's quadrant one. Now you're back down to expediting and firefighting. So be honest with where your time's going and calculate these and come up with what your total is. But think of if you're working 60-hour weeks, divide your time that way. If you're working 40-hour weeks, divide it there. If you're working 30-hour weeks, God bless you. But, divvy it up there. But take an honest assessment of where your time is going as you lead and build your company. And once you get that statistic done, if your friction, which is buckets 4 and 5, So that's your expediting, firefighting, doing other people's work. If you've got that down to less than 20%, you're driving a high enterprise value. You're building a Swiss watch. Number one, you're going to make a lot more progress. You're going to experience a lot more fortune. Number two, you're going to have a lot more freedom because the business isn't controlling you. Number three, you're going to have a lot more fun. You're going to have more energy working in your business. And most importantly, your business is going to be worth a lot more. As you go down, as your friction gets to 20 to 40%, now you're the chief operating founder. You're really doing a lot of the execution that you should have architected the structure and the right team to go execute. You're probably doing well compared to your peers, but you're not maximizing what your company could be and the freedom that you could be enjoying out of your business. And then if your friction is greater than 40%, you're in this chief everything officer role, and your enterprise value is going to be low. You're going to run the risk of experiencing high stress. And if it hasn't caught up to you yet, eventually it'll catch up to you. Eventually, you'll become the bottleneck in the business. So Peter Drucker, I'm going to come back to Peter Drucker. He wrote a book, The Effective Executive. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But I love this quote in the book. He said, "There's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all." And so my challenge with this worksheet for you is to say, what do I need to abandon? Where do I get involved, either to expedite and firefight work that I shouldn't? I should have somebody else do that. Or where am I taking on work and doing things that I no longer should do? You think if you're the CEO of your enterprise, and think if you took what Tim did and you could 20x the value, even if you could 10x, even if you could 5x the value, what would your time be worth as the leader of that company? And then you say, what work am I doing where the labor arbitrage on that is so negative? I'm so upside down. I've got to hire key people, or I've got to empower key people, or we got to build systems to do this work so I'm no longer spending my time on it. Scaling a company takes a lot of mental energy, and you're not going to have the mental energy to think if you're caught up in the business, expediting, firefighting, doing tactical work. It's just too hard to be strategic and tactical at the same time. So I challenge you to say, what are three things that I'm going to give up, and write them down on your worksheet. Now, I'm honored to have several clients on the call today, and would love to work with you and go through your worksheets with you. And those of you that are not clients, I'll give you some options at the end, but you'll get a lot just going through this exercise. So let's talk about an action plan to move you to the CEO. Number one, set valuation as a target. And by the way, this doesn't have to be public. It could be public, but it doesn't have to be. But in your mind, what is the value of the company that you want to build? And as you know, there's two levers to get that valuation. One is you can grow your EBITDA, your bottom line profitability, and that's what most people focus on. But the second is you can grow your multiple. And I'll tell you, the multiple that Tim got was 2.5 times the multiple that he got from the offer just 4 years earlier. 2.5 times. So he made money growing EBITDA, but he also made money by getting a bigger multiple. How did he get the bigger multiple? Focusing on the three priorities that we just went through. But it starts with setting a valuation target and getting clarity. Another great Stephen Covey principle: begin with the end in mind. What are we ultimately trying? And even if you're not going to sell, that's fine. Let's build a valuable company so bankers value you, future employees value you, and you've got more options in how you want to scale the business. Number two, clarify and commit to your top three priorities. If you went back to your alma mater and they invited you up on stage to tell your story, could you articulate your three priorities in the way that Tim Cook did. What are your most important priorities? What is it that you wake up every day saying, I'm going to focus 80% of my energy on these priorities? I invite you to adopt the three that Tim gave. I invite you to use the ones that are on my worksheet, but I also give you the freedom to say, Mark, those don't work for me. This would be better. Then let's go with those. But let's have some priorities that you're going to use to govern and drive your quadrant two time. I want to emphasize this is quadrant two time in those three priorities. Then number three, track your time and log where your time's going. You would be shocked if you put pen and pencil to where your time goes every day. Create a stop doing list, adopt the abandonment process that Drucker preaches so heavily. And then of course, leverage a coach to help to make the ride easier for yourself. Now, some of you on this call might want to take advantage of the 12% option. I talked about this. You'll remember when I talked about the CEOs that had created the most valuation, and 40% of them, two of the five were the founders, but three of the five were non-founders. Now, I don't see that same type of percentage in the clients I work with in the middle market as I talked about. I see about 12% is my best guesstimate at about what percentage of CEOs I work with that, or founders I work with, that say, I'm going to promote somebody else to CEO and I'm going to take a different role in the company. I'm going to add value, but I'm going to take a different role. And I'm going to let this person wake up every day focused on valuation. So I call it the 12% option. And remember, it's less than 5% of the founders that are on the Fortune 500. But I know we've got some folks on the call today, and some of you are undoubtedly contemplating this. Maybe you consider transitioning the CEO role. Maybe because you no longer have or want to commit the energy to scaling the business, and that's 100% fine. And you can still be the majority shareholder, or maybe there's something else. Maybe there's a part of the business that you're passionate about. One of Tim's founders was just passionate about selling and managing strategic relationships. Did not like managing salespeople. So literally another move Tim made on the people side was bringing a sales manager in, and that founder served as a team leader under that sales leader. So he mentored, but he didn't have the day-to-day hiring, firing, management of the sales team, but he was accountable for going out and driving strategic relationships. So every founder does not have to be a CEO. There's plenty of examples of others that have brought CEOs in to help. And quite often, if there is a recapitalization event, oftentimes they'll bring a CEO in. So sometimes that happens because you recapitalize. Now, in Tim's case, he's continued on leading that organization as the CEO. But this could be something for you to consider. So I've saved some time. We've got about 8 to 10 minutes, and I would like to open it up for some questions that you might have. How do I implement this? Or Mark, here's my situation. I'm not sure this would work for me. So let me open it up. And if you've got a question, I'm going to ask you just to unmute yourself and ask your question, but you're also willing, if you'd be more comfortable, to drop it into chat. So I'm going to in fact, while you're thinking about your question, let me give you a couple that I hear quite often when I talk about this concept. Undoubtedly, the most common is, Mark, we're small. We don't have the staff and the structure that would allow me to stay out of quadrant one. I mean, I'd love to be like Tim Cook, or I'd love to be like Tim, but I just don't have it. So my response to that is that, number one, necessity is the mother of invention. So we get what we tolerate. So the more you keep doing quadrant one work, the more of that work is going to grow. The less you do it, we'll find ways around that. And so some steps you could take to start minimizing that is start is a lot of my clients will create a safe space and they'll say, okay, I'm going to take Monday morning from 8 to noon, and I'm going to work from some special strategic place. It could be their home office. It could be I'm going to go to a Starbucks. I've got a client that has an airplane and a hangar, and he's built his hangar out. He actually spends a day there every week. Now he's spending a lot more than a day, but it started with a day a week just working from the hangar. Nobody knows where I am. Nobody knows how to get a hold of me. And the company's got to survive without me being there. Another way to execute this is to say, I'm going to take a couple hours and I'm going to go do strategic work. Maybe that involves going out to a customer site. Maybe that involves going out to project sites. Maybe that goes, remember Sam Walton, scaled up Walmart, was famous for going and visiting stores. He would just show up at a store and just walk the store. He wasn't there because there was an urgent issue. He wasn't there because somebody was threatening to quit. He just set a schedule where his goal was to go around and visit every one of his stores every year. And that rhythm kept him in touch with the people issues, and it kept him in touch with strategically what did they need to do different to continue to win clients. So those are a couple of questions, or that's a question that I get quite a bit. So, question. Anybody else have a question on the call? All right, I'm going to give you another one. Oh, here we go. George, thank you for the question. Is a system integration company who does not manufacture any products, or our focus has been on people, execution, cash, and strategizing on client project acquisition. Where would you advise me to focus the most? Well, George, that's thanks for the question. Difficult, but I do know you a little bit, George. I would encourage you to continue to focus on strategy. So how can you be unique and valuable to the market that you want to serve? And I happen to know you all have done some work in this area, but I'd continue to look for those constraints. So think of a constraint is, what do people dislike about your industry? Or what is a problem that the industry has just assumed is an industry-wide problem? Right? It's just the nature of our business. It just comes with the territory. I think of high turnover as one, or customer turnover, or late projects in system integrate. It's just hard. Everybody's got to deal with subs and GCs that, are off track. We get weather delays, and they just begin to accept that that's the way it is. The companies that break out and scale challenge that status quo and say, we're going to do things different. We're going to address that constraint in a way that gives us a competitive advantage. And by the way, puts a moat around your business that makes it very hard for somebody else to duplicate it and makes your business worth a lot more money. So I would encourage you to look for that externally as well as internally. What part of the process could you own and do? It's no big secret that AI is out there. It's giving a lot of opportunities for companies to leverage outsized advantages in terms of how they execute different parts of their business. So that might be another area as part of strategy that I would encourage you to focus on. Great question. Thank you, George.
Hey Mark, Jonathan here. I got a question for you.
Hey,
Um,
Jonathan.
hey, I got all this. I got these calendar blocks. I got these. I've got the quadrants. I've got all the stuff, the tasks. I do it sometimes. Sometimes I don't. Most times I don't, to be honest, right? Always getting pulled back. Always, just not giving that. Not really protecting those spots and times. Is that a personal problem? Is there, is there some secret to just being hard-nosed about that, or is that just take time and practice?
Well, I'm not gonna let you bait me into telling you you have a personal problem.
Yeah.
But Jonathan, it could be a personal problem. I mean, let's face it. We can get addicted and I mean this in the most loving and caring way, but we can get addicted to expediting and firefighting work. I mean, there is a sense of purpose, there's a sense of I saved the day, there's an adrenaline rush. And so I might ask you to check and see is that what makes it easy for me to jump back in? There's also the fear side of it that's very real, and I'm not going to make light of this at all. I mean, the fear that, God, if I don't get involved, we can't afford to lose this customer. I can't afford this project to go awry. I can't afford. And that fear says, heck with working on this strategic stuff. I'm going to jump in and make sure that this is done right. So those two competing energies, if you will, are very, very, very real. I would just encourage you to start small. So, protect one or two, and maybe even start an hour a day or an hour one day a week. And then you go to 2 hours, and you go to 3 hours, and you go to four, and eventually get you to five, eventually get you to a full day. I will tell you, the clients that I see that scale the most protect that strategic thinking time. And most have a spot outside the office they go to and they just don't come in that day. And guess what? The team finds a way to make decisions and get stuff done without them there. And then it allows them to learn where have we architected the right systems? Where do we have the right people? What strategically do we need to work on to up-level our organization rather than reacting to problems, expediting and firefighting?
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. All right, who else?
I'll throw one at you, Mark. It's good to see some familiar faces here on the call. So maybe just taking John one step further. We've kind of been at different stages of this in the past, but you got 5 buckets there, Mark. Where would you coach somebody to start?
Well, I mean, Jim Collins said, get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. And there's some good wisdom in that. But as you know, Graham, when I start with clients, I start with where are we making money and where aren't we making money, which really takes us back to strategy. So are we spending our time? To me, execution is like on the football field. Are my players working hard? Are they grinding? Are they getting off every snap? Are they fast? Are they making the blocks they need to make? People is, do I have the right size athletes to execute the strategy that I want to win the game? In other words, are we going to use speed? Are we going to be big and tough? Are we going to use size? Are we going to control the line of scrimmage? And then strategy is, how do I have that receiver be wide open in the end zone with nobody around him? Or how does that running back run that play and never get touched? Right? That's where we really architect the play that takes the least. So I'm a fan of getting focused on where are we making the most money, where are our best clients, and working backwards from there. Do we have the right team? Number one, are we focused on a strategy? Number two, do we have the right team to execute that strategy? And then number three, do we have the right structure, the right systems and processes around them to so that we can take, not everybody needs to be a superstar. Can we get more and more? We talk a lot about A players. I'd love every one of my clients to have 100% A players, but can we architect a system that B players can survive or be productive and help us win while we're developing them into A players? So that would be mine: strategy, people, execution. Great question, Graham. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? One more question. Okay. Let me give my closing challenge to you. So in your next leadership meeting, I first of all, I challenge you to become the chief executive officer. So if you're running your company, own it. right? Own it. And the chief executive officer should spend 80% of their time on the business, 20% of their time in the business. 80% focused on the priorities that are most important from a quadrant 2 perspective, 20% of the time reacting, expediting, doing work others should be doing. That's just part of getting a business scaled. So get clear on where you are, get clear on where you want to be, and commit that I'm going to take the steps necessary to grow into that role. Number two, do the work in the spreadsheet and then share it with your team. So in your next team meeting, bring the results and say, here's where I want to get to. Here's what I think is eating up my time. How can we get better so that I've got more time to think and work on the business and help us create the great organization that we all want to be a part of? Number three, ask your team to weigh in. How can you help? What can you, in a good format to use is what can you keep, start, or stop doing that would help us make progress towards this ideal? And then number four, remember, you've got a friend here, 15 years scaling up coach. I've worked with dozens of CEOs in your same shoes that have dealt with the same issues like Jonathan brought up, same challenges like Graham brought up and George brought up, that are looking for help. And it just helps to have somebody that you can lean on, that you can reach out to at any time to help you get unstuck or help you make the decision and commit to what's the right move to get your company to the level or stage that you want to get them to. Um, a great next step, if you're a client, we probably have a coaching call coming up so we can put this on our agenda. We may have a planning meeting coming up, so we may want to talk about inserting this in the planning meeting. But of course, you're always welcome to grab time on my calendar. I use a Calendly app. If you're not a client, you're welcome and encouraged, in fact, schedule a 15-minute consultation and let me hear what's going on in your business. Let me give you some recommendations or some examples of what I've seen others done, and let's help you. Let's help you get unstuck so you can keep moving your business forward. I'm also giving you my phone number, and you've also got my email address. So if you're more comfortable just calling, texting, or emailing, you're welcome to do that as well. So again, don't hesitate. Um, hit the code up there and get yourself booked for a consultation. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Pay attention to your email. We'll be doing these every month going forward. We're really hitting the topics like this one that I'm seeing in the clients I work with that can really be constraints, that can really be barriers that if we can undo them, can really help us scale the business. And I just want to leave you with a final thought, and that is to remember that you can master these hidden secrets of fortune, freedom, and fun. And I'm here to help. So give me a chance. So thanks for attending today. And I look forward to talking to each of you on one of the follow-up consultations that you all set. So have a great day and keep scaling.